So, hey, everybody, welcome. I hope you are enjoying the day. My name is Paige Sacker, and I'm with Virginia Cooperative Extension Principal. And thank you so much for coming and joining us. Today, our last speaker is Stephanie Johnson, and she's with Steeze Conservation Landscaping. Stephanie is a conservationist, landscaper, designer, and owner of Steeze, a friendly company with a focus on native habitats and green living. Her educational background is in business technologies and environmental studies. She's a certified Chesapeake Bay landscape professional and is an active environmental volunteer and community educator. As an urban farmer with a specialization in small space food production, Stephanie utilizes hydroponics and containerized systems to show how productive small spaces can be. Stephanie also loves to educate children about native plant species and local habitats, and is a proud mom of 4 and true native born and raised Prince William County, Virginia. So welcome, Stephanie. She's going to talk to us about conservation lands. No,
Yeah, one of those.
Let's see. We're on slide 2. So there you go.
All righty. All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here. I kind of want to see where we're all at in gardening. Are we new gardeners? Any new gardeners in here? Everybody been like, what's, I want to know who I'm speaking to. Online, are we able to see any, can they hear us and is it all good?
I think, let us know if you're having any problems hearing Stephanie. She's asking for level of gardening. So if you want to put that in the chat.
Raise hands if we just started gardening, just started working with natives. Okay, cool. And then we've been gardening for a little while. Yeah, okay. All right. So I'm gonna try to get to everybody, and at the end we should have plenty of time for questions. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I'm not the loudest speaker. Okay.
Oh, wait, 1 second, let me get out of the chat. Click. It doesn't like that Zoom is overriding the screen, so.
Okay.
The combination of Zoom and.
This is why I work outside. You know?
They're conflicting, yeah. Okay.
So I work on lots of properties all over Northern Virginia, and I get to see many, many different kinds. So here's one. So raise a hand, shady properties. Got lots of shade on our property. Yeah. Okay. And what about overgrown properties? Okay, we got some good gardeners in here. Okay. Okay. Very, very sunny, lots of turf. Yeah. Okay. Erosion, lots of water movement. Okay. And invasives. Yeah, oh yeah, oh, sorry. So this is the thing. So these are our common landscapes, and this is the stuff that I see pretty on a daily basis. So this is the kind of stuff we're gonna be talking about. So also get a lot of HOAs. So anybody got any strict? Okay, yeah, that's a thing. Let's see. Sitting water, impermeable hardscapes. Having a difficult time with that, okay? Got any friends hanging out with you? Isn't it cute? I literally walked up to this guy and said, yeah. You never, this is just a regular neighborhood. There was no reason for, but it didn't seem like a reason. But mom said it was a reason. She left it there for a reason, you know? So we just leave them alone. Okay, so when you dig in dirt, you find lots of treasures. And these are some of the things that we've been finding. When you're working in properties, often, I mean, it's really hard to tell what you can and cannot do. So some of the things that we know we can do is we know we can call Miss Utility, or what we call that 811 now. You know, you can call and get your property marked, so you know where the gas line is, where the water is, all that good stuff, right? But there's also going to be things in there you really just wouldn't expect. And you almost kind of have to plan for that, and it's hard. Sometimes there's wires that go to nowhere until you find out that they went somewhere. That's also a thing. Yeah. In this one, this is actually in a historic area in Manassas City. And Lord knows what you're going to find there, okay? Because when you're in a historic area, I mean, this is really, really old. So as we're removing English ivy and vinca, which is this mix that you're seeing there, we found a whole tree, like, that was fun. And trying to dig that out was pretty intense. So we're gonna talk about some of that kind of stuff, like how we work on these properties, how we work in it. Because it's really easy to be like, plant natives. That sounds very simple and we love planting natives, but it doesn't always work out that simply. Okay? Also planning for the problems to happen before they happen. So for example, this is a new property that we did a patio for, and like, you notice the builders always do this where they drop the water right there next to the house.
Yeah.
I don't know why that's a thing. And then like your electricity is right here, but if you don't pre-plan, then you can't use your electricity, you know, otherwise it's gonna be draping over your patio and stuff. Also, when you're putting in something like that, you're putting in hardscaping, it may not be the most permeable solution. So you gotta plan for like the water that's gonna come down from that. What happens to that, right? So in this scenario, this was trying to solve the problems before they happen. So basically, we take the water that's gonna drop down here, and we're rerouting it to gardens that we're about to build. The thing about water, there's many things. So one of the things is that you don't want water to be coming down right directly next to your house. It needs to be at least 10 feet away. And in problem solving and working within that environment, it's thinking about, okay, what's gonna happen if I don't, you know? A lot of times people will call me out and they're like, oh, you know, I want natives, I want them here. And it's like, yeah, but like, you got a bad erosion problem. We should probably address that first. And the thing is, when you kind of ignore all of these little things, they turn into big problems long-term, big expensive problems. So thinking about what can we do beforehand, right? So one of those things would be to test your soil, not just for, ooh, can we grow plants here? It's about like, can this absorb the water well? And it's really easy to do yourself. If you pay somebody to do it, I'm gonna charge you. But like, this is an infiltration test and it's fairly simple. You're basically digging a foot down into the ground and you pour water in it because you want to see how long it takes for that water to disappear.
So it's a perk test.
Similar to a perk test. So basically, it's trying to figure out how well can that water be absorbed in the ground that it's going in. And so you saturate the hole first and let that disappear, and then you do it again. And the idea is to see how quickly does water kind of drain out here. And that will change how you put in plants and what plants you put in. Because the tricky thing about native plants is that they don't all go together in one spot. It's not like this like fun, we all get along and like we all hang out together. It doesn't work that way. So, you know, in our common communities, we're going to be finding plants that are from floodland areas. We're going to be finding plants that are in really dry oak, acidic soils. You know, we have different communities. So it's trying to figure out, okay, what kind of community do I currently have? Then I get the properties also that it's like, they don't care what kind of community they have, and they want it to be the kind of community that they want. And that's not exactly a bad thing, because it's your property and you paid for it, and you know, you want the plants that you want. But sometimes it takes a lot of work to get it to that point. Okay, so let's talk about some of that work. So one of the common things that we do is smothering. I love this technique a lot, but it doesn't work for everything, okay? So smothering is a technique where we're trying to kill what's under it, basically. And it's really easy to do to turf grasses, because turf grasses don't put on deep roots. Their roots are going down like maybe a foot, you know? And although grass always wants to grow in places you don't want it, it actually is really easy to take out. So smothering is a technique that you can use when you're trying to get rid of plants that don't have deep tap roots, okay? So in this example here, there was actually a lot of weeds in here, and this one was a lot of Bermuda grass, and Bermuda grass is actually a real tough one to cut. So because Bermuda grass does put out a crazy rhizome that is just like, where does this end? And it doesn't ever going. So what you have to do is basically you're getting the plastic on there, and you want to use a UV resistant plastic. This one, these are usually between like 4 and 6 milliliters. And you basically get it on there really nice and snug. You're trying to get rid of UV lights. You're trying to reduce the air that goes under it, and you're trying to reduce its ability to get water. You're starving the plant from what it wants. Okay? And
A lot of sunlight, so it's hot.
yes. So he got there before I did. Yeah, good job there. So basically, there's a time period in which to do this. And whenever someone doesn't listen to me about this point, it's always a problem. Okay? So this is something you do like between like June and August. Okay? Because yeah, it gets nice and hot and it just starts to bake everything underneath it. And it's really helpful. And sometimes you have to communicate to the neighbors, right? So here we have a sign, this is an HOA area, we have a sign telling them what's happening. Because they're probably like, I don't know, utility work happening here, you know, there's a lot of questions. But if we have to let them know that, you know, this is intentional, and we're gonna get to that, we're gonna make a bigger point on that later. In some areas, you have to put heavy things on. So here, we're using some stone that we were already gonna use on the property. But people started stealing the stone, that was also a thing. So know your area. But you need something kind of heavy to keep it down, because sometimes you're gonna get those wind bursts that just don't work out too well. Usually we use landscaping pens, but that's not great for wind. So if you tried to do this in the fall, it's not that it wouldn't work, but you're gonna have more wind, intense winds that are gonna move it around, and that's annoying. Also, you're not getting the same type of heat typically. We don't know what type of seasons we're having these days, so it may work. Today we're zone what, you know what I mean? Like, you just don't know. But smothering is one of the best techniques. So in a nutshell, what we're doing is we're killing off the organic matter in a way that like the soil organisms can break it down and turn it into a nitrogen source for your plants. So you're basically feeding the plants that are about to go into it. It's a lot easier than going in there and like putting down cardboard and paper and stuff like that. But it does take a while. So you're looking at about 3 to 4 months of smothering. If you got Bermuda grass, it's a solid 4 months, because when you pull it out, it'll still be like light green under there. Like it really wants to live. If you have something that's like tree of heaven or something like that, bamboo, that doesn't smother well. Okay. Learn from experience, you can't do that one. So in preparing soil for natives, it's funny because everybody thinks that, oh, just plant them, they'll be fine, they like it here. Not necessarily. The conditions that native plants, you know, evolved in are not like what they are today, okay? We have subsoils, we don't have topsoil anymore. And it takes years and years and years for soil to develop, and we just don't have that. So we basically have to kind of mimic what is created in soil. And some of those plants are really specific to the types of conditions that are in a forest. So one technique that we use is we take hardwood shredded mulch and we mix it with compost. And it creates very nice, almost soil. Not quite soil, but getting there. And the idea there is to create an environment that's really great for soil organisms. They help to make everything work. All those plants, they're not your green thumb. It's about the organisms that are living in the soil that make food available to them. Okay, so in this area, you can see that's what we've done. Now, it can be a little challenging because depending on how big your property is or how small your property is, to get enough materials on there can be tough. I know an issue that I used to deal with was like, I didn't have a pickup truck. And they were like, you can come get this compost, but you need a pickup truck to go get the compost, you know? And it's like, do I have somebody who get a pickup truck? When they dump it, what's that gonna be like? So sometimes you have to work within your means. Breaking down your project, figuring out, okay, how long is it gonna take me to develop this property or to develop this, even just one bed that I'm working in? So that comes with measuring, okay? Square footage is very easy to measure. I just use my feet. Nancy Berlin taught me that one, actually. I just use my feet. And you just calculate, and you don't even have to calculate anything these days. You can just go online and use a calculator. Everything's done for you. You just say, it's this wide and this long, and it's done. The beauty of technology. And you figure out how much you need. So I'm usually doing like a 50-50 of like, and so, okay, not endorsing any products. I do like this one though. So Leaf Grow comes from Maryland. It comes from their residents and they basically take all their leaves and compost it and sell it back to us. And we love it here in Virginia. So that's a product that like Merrifield, I think carries,
Ace,
Ace
I get mine at Ace
from Ace.
and Home Depot.
I know Meadows carries something similar. That is like a leaf product, not exactly this one. But I really like it. It smells good. That's a thing. When you're working in the soil, your soil shouldn't smell anaerobic. That's a sign that it isn't altogether right. Okay, that maybe you don't have enough air circulating or something like that. So it's, smell it. If it smells bad, maybe not go or mix it up, add some air to it. So another technique that I want to point out, and the whole point of me showing you these pictures is kind of give you ideas to work with, okay? So in DIYs, this is always like a fail that I never see, and it just kind of annoys me. It's like a pet peeve. So you see how here, we've made what looks like a trench, okay? And what that is for is so that materials have somewhere to fall. So a lot of times people create these beds and they're just kind of flat, and then they erode very easily because they didn't create an area for water to flow. But as you're doing that, you have to also look at the grade. Where is the grade going? If you try to grade against your natural grade of your yard, it's going to be difficult for you. You make a harder job for yourself. And then sometimes water can get trapped if it's not going with the grade. So when we say going with the grade, it's kind of like thinking about a slide, You're going down the slide. If you go up the slide, if you were having fun, you're doing it that way, right? So, but it doesn't work that way with water. So water needs a place to go. So as you're planning and soil and preparing your soil, you're also thinking about how to move that stuff. And we'll talk a little more about that later. Okay, what else do we point out? Oh yeah. Machines. We like machines, they don't always work. They don't always work, and they don't always work the way we want them to, okay? So I can tell you from experience that tilling is just a very difficult thing to do here in Virginia, in our subsoil clay. And it's not like your go-to thing to do anyway, because you don't want to go and destroy your soil. But sometimes you have areas that have to be dug up. It's not your go-to tool unless you have a really nice, great soil that hasn't been disrupted. If you have compacted soils and stuff like that, it's not going to work out that great. So usually we're manually digging holes, okay? So that goes into your thought process of how you're preparing your gardens. If you don't feel comfortable physically doing that part, maybe delegate that one. You know what I mean? Maybe that's the part of it that you share with someone else, okay? In this area here, we're doing a VCAP installation. So that is Virginia
Conservation Assistance Program.
There you go. So VCAP's a really great program that's really useful for homeowners. They give you a grant for putting in conservation landscaping and fixing erosion issues. And you have to stick to your local ecotype plants. So if you want to put in like something that's not here, Amsonia, beautyberry, yeah. And so if you want to put in like a native that's not native here, they may not go for that, They're pretty particular about it, but also a great group of folks, okay? And so they can help you get some money to put towards your project. And often that's really helpful because if you're working with a designer or you have to bring out a professional in any kind of way, just know it's gonna a little chunk of change. Okay.
And that's through the Soil and Water
Soil and Water.
Conservation District.
Yeah.
Virginia Conservation.
It's DCAP,
DCAP.
Virginia Conservation Assistance Program.
So here we're putting in a swale, and we were like, the soil's okay here. We're gonna just till it out. It wasn't okay. Yeah, that didn't work out too well. So we had to dig it out. So, wanted to show you a few things here. So number one, when you're preparing your soil, know you're gonna make a huge mess. That is a thing, okay? It's kind of like when you're redecorating in your house, you're gonna tear it up first before it becomes something pretty. So have your steps in mind. Let's say that you have a partner that's like not that into what you're doing. You may want to explain that out first, just, you know. But in this area, we took out Pachysandra, and Pachysandra was like there for an established long period of time. You never know, yeah. And then we had to build the soil back up. So here, most of the hard work is already done. Fortunately, we don't, because we're digging and we don't have our own camera crew following us, you don't get to see the whole thing. One day. So in this one, I think this is really fun and something that is really great for homeowners that we often don't think about. You can use all of the materials that you already found naturally to work with in your garden. You don't have to spend like a whole ton of money. So I'm going to show you what's happening here. So this area is sloping down. You see the grade? Grade's going down. Oops. And basically, we want it to hold until the roots are what's holding the area in place. Okay? So these are they're gonna switch jobs. So what we used was just like some thick sticks that we found on the property. And we're basically using them to kind of terrace a little area. And we put paper at the bottom of it to kind of hold some of that compost in place, some of those materials in place. And then by the time that paper breaks down, the roots will be the ones that are holding everything in place. So it's really inexpensive this way, and you don't have to spend like a whole lot of money. People are like, did you get coconut cores? And no, I didn't do any of that. Spending all this crazy amount of money. You can use what's right there. Logs, you know, just as long as they're manageable. How many times have I posted, like, I need some sticks?
I still love it.
People will be like, oh yeah, I got some sticks, cool, I need those. And that's what we use them for. Okay, being very intentional, this is really important, okay? When your neighbors look into a garden that is native or, you know, a wildlife garden, what do they see? What's some guesses?
Oh, they think it's messy. They think it's wrong.
They see a mess.
Unkept.
Unkept. Ew, what's happening over there? Doesn't like it, right? So sometimes we have to let them know that there's some uniformity here a little bit, okay? And that this is an intentional area. Now, I say this a lot and people are like, I don't care what my neighbors think, right? But the reason we care about what our neighbors think is because we want to connect those properties with our properties for wildlife, okay? It is so fragmented here. The spaces are so fragmented that there's nowhere for, we have no real wildlife corridors here. There's nowhere for them to be. And our properties are like the refugee centers for a lot of these animals and insects that are literally like, almost becoming extinct, you know? So it's really important that we communicate to the neighbors that we're doing something purposeful and they are encouraged to do it too. So as they see your garden coming along, they're like, oh, I should do this. You know, like people don't normally see like Joe Pye weed and be like, oh man, I gotta get that plant, you know? But, and this is one of the most important plants to be in your yard because not only is it a host plant, but you know, it has a pithy stem that can be used to store eggs, etc. So this is really important. This particular property, I was really mad the other day actually, because their mow guy came and like knocked down everything in the garden. And I was like,
He went into the
"Are you kidding me?" Yeah,
With the string
he thought he
trellis?
was being helpful,
Yeah, they do.
and I had to explain that he wasn't being helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
But borders, okay? So sometimes borders can be like solid plantings of something. And this isn't exactly a bad thing. So let's say that you have some insects that really need nectar, right? Instead of them having to go all over trying to find it, you really have a good solid area for them to be, they're more likely going to be there, right? So when you're trying to introduce more into your garden, that's actually not a bad thing. But usually when you put something that's like pretty bright in the front, and it's very intentional, it's showing them that you did this on purpose and you want it to look this way. Now let's say you have like an HOA or like a really fancy area that everything needs to be real tidy and clean. You can go in there when that plant hits the height that you want it to be at, just chop it. Just chop it when it gets there, and it's usually gonna continue to do what it's gonna do, as long as it's herbaceous. If it's a woody plant, don't do that.
Mhm.
Okay? So pruning for health, okay? So pruning is very different, than trimming. But people hear pruning and they hear the same thing. They think it's all the same. So pruning is not chopping everything up into squares and triangles and circles. Pruning is for the health of the plant. So here, most people are gonna look in here and be like, oh, it's very green, it's healthy, right? That's not what's happening here. So there's not enough air circulating. So you're gonna have more issues, you know? This plant needs to breathe. So on this side of it, you can see the difference. When we took out canes that were just completely unnecessary, look at the major difference between this side and this side. Huge difference. That's a rosemary,
I thought so, yeah.
which is a shrub. A lot of people don't think about
Wow.
that.
Never seen it.
You plant that herb, it's a shrub. Anyway, so a lot of times we are interacting with old plants within our gardens, right?
Mhm.
So it's not just about the new plants that we're putting in. We have some stuff that might stay there, okay? Maybe the stuff that's staying there is native, maybe it isn't, you know? Just because it's non-native doesn't necessarily mean you should go and dig it out immediately. If it's invasive, get that thing out of there. But, you know, sometimes it's really expensive removing plants. Sometimes you have an HOA that says, don't remove this plant. You know, there's all kinds of reasons. Don't feel bad about it. But you have to work with what you have. So afterthoughts, after you put in plants. Sometimes you have to keep those plants in place. They need time to mature in the ground, okay? So on this side, this is another VCAP installation where we had to put in, I think this one's straw. But it's trying to keep it in place. So if you have an area, you see how the grade's going this way on purpose, because that's where the drain is. You have to keep everything still and in place. And you can use natural materials to do that as well. This is what nature does, right? So you can, just like we saw the sticks before and like leaves and things like that, you can use those to your advantage to keep plants in place and to help protect some of the new plants that are going in. Okay? This one is for deer. So, we have a lot of deer friends, okay? And sometimes they can be a little disruptive when you have a new planting, because they're really, really hungry. And I have a lot of compassion for deer, honestly, because there's just not enough food. So, you know, if I'm hungry and then like my favorite food's out there, you're gonna go eat it, right? So you have to plan to protect those things. So in this area, we have some trees and shrubs that are known for a little bit of browsing. And also, just because they're not known doesn't mean they won't browse them. And so planning to kind of cage them out so that they'll just leave them alone for a while. They'll still eat the tops of this, but they'll have time to get their roots nice and happy. There are some plants that are just a little bit more prone to deer injury than others. But it really just depends on that particular area. I had an area in Loudoun County that they were eating ilex. They were eating American holly.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? Why?
Oh.
Yeah, they were eating American holly. I don't want to get too into plants, because we'll be talking all day. But that's the thing, and preparing and knowing like, okay, when I finish this, I don't want it devastated. I just invested money into this, okay? So just kind of knowing the wildlife that's out there and paying attention to how they use the property. Bunnies can be a thing. Bunnies can be a little bit disruptive too. They like Leachers, like they like a lot of stuff. And so it's trying to kind of, it's not like you're trying to build a cage, you're just temporarily protecting it, okay? Another thing that we did here, and this isn't something that like everyone like cheers for, but it is a thing, is that we planted clover into this grass, okay? Now clover is a non-native, but it's non-invasive. And it is something that a lot of insects can host on and something that the deer and the rabbits like to eat. So we gave them a grazing area to use instead. Because we knew that there was a lot of foot traffic for deer and stuff here, so it's really putting those thoughts into how they're gonna be interacting with space, and it's been working. So, I just want your opinions before I tell you about this, before I tell you what's happening here. What do you guys see? Anybody online talking? Okay. What do you guys see, left to right? Our opinions may be a little different from our neighbors though, but what do you guys see?
It's overgrown. I'm kidding.
Yeah, yeah. Anything?
Is that daylilies down front on the
All the
left?
same over to the.
That's all kinds of stuff happening
I
here.
can't identify the plants, but it looks kind of overgrown.
There was a lot of stuff happening here. Now, in defense of this homeowner, she actually had mobility issues and had a difficult time getting out there and handling that garden. But her neighbors were overjoyed when we mulched this. Okay? Neighbors love mulch.
Yeah, I mean, what's wrong?
Mulch is a thing, okay? And we all have our mixed feelings about mulch, but I can tell you that it does help to communicate a message to your neighbors that it is useful and that you're caring for it, okay? But this area actually needed mulch, and I'm gonna tell you why. So although it seems like we have a lot of living mulch here, this was the driest property. I mean, so dry that anytime she actually wanted to plant something intentional, it wouldn't grow there because there wasn't enough moisture. This stuff that's thriving here, this is stuff that likes dry soil. That's it. Like it wasn't because it's like the greatest soil. It just was happy in where it was. So we had to rip out a lot of that.
What is it?
A lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is like some cool like golden rods and stuff like that in there, but there's just a lot of things. There's a lot of stuff happening. So that had to be removed out. And this is a thought process of when, especially if you're working in your front yard, people like mulch. The good thing about mulch is that mulch is breaking down over time. Don't use like, what is it, pine bark and stuff like that. That never breaks down, it takes forever. But if you use like a hardwood shredded mulch, something like that, your neighbors know that like, oh yeah, okay, they care about it, right? But also it helps to protect the soil a little bit. It's breaking down, it's turning into things that the organisms can use and consume, and it helps to protect some of those weed plants, okay? So although we all have different opinions about it, it's universally like acceptable as like a cared about garden. So this is demonstrating some of that like Chelsea chop stuff, okay? And some of the things to know about when you first plant native plants, typically they're not looking like this when you get them, okay? And this is actually even kind of a rare thing that they're usually not starting off this big. So first of all, our native plant availability is a lot less than like going to Home Depot and picking up some Asiatic lilies or something. Like we don't have a whole lot of plants available. So in the availability that we have, they're not from out of a greenhouse and like blooming when you get it and, you know, perfect. So especially if you're working in an area where you're sharing that space or you're having to, once again, communicate an idea, know that when you first put it in, it just looks like this. Sometimes it looks less than this. We've done dormant planting where we're putting in stuff that you'll never know it's there until it comes up, you know? So they'll be like, did you plant something here? You know, and there's lots planted, but it's just understanding what's gonna happen beforehand. So this turned into this within the first season. And that's not always the case. Sometimes when you plant new natives, they take a while to get going. You know, perennials usually take, what's the time period? What's that magic time period? 3 to 4 years, yeah, 3 to 4 years to get themselves established. Sometimes they're gonna do something interesting. Sometimes they're just working on those roots, okay? So kind of pre-preparing your mind for that. Because a lot of times people will plant something and be like, I think it's dead. It's not dead. It's working on it. It's working on what it's gonna be, okay? Oh, also, this is a demonstration of Chelsea track too, where we're cutting herbaceous plants at a level that was acceptable for that community. And then, they will flower right there at the area.
So is that New England aster or purple dome?
It's a New England
Yeah,
aster,
sure.
which we know is a huge plant,
Yes.
but we made it a small plant.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know, we don't love that idea always, but there are scenarios for it, okay? Because we want natives versus not have natives.
Mhm.
So sometimes the compromise is like making it a smaller plant that's like more acceptable.
You give it a haircut and you get more blooms.
Yeah, you know,
Yep. Cool.
it's a great way to look at it.
And it works with the pink, it clearly did it with the pink lily grass as well.
I love mealy grass. That's a,
But you can't
Plant
healthy chop a
plant.
mealy grass.
no,
No,
no.
no.
That grass is gonna do what it wants to do. It also will decide if it's gonna show you, if it's gonna be showy that year. Sometimes it'll be like, not this time.
It is kind of tricky.
Okay, so also being prepared for this. So, for some of us, we're like, this is amazing, this is great.
So beautiful.
Your neighbor might not think so, you know? So some of these plants can get really big, and it's knowing how to position them within the garden so that everyone understands what's happening. Once again, if you have an area that you don't have to worry about anybody seeing, then, you know, whatever, to them. But it's nice to have layering, and layering, there's two different ways of thinking about layering. So there is the habitat layering, and then there's the way, we think of layering in landscaping.
Mm.
So in landscaping, layering is like, okay, small to big, so we can see it laid out. It's like a presentation.
Mm.
It's like if you go to a store and they've just freshly stocked it and it's all pretty and nice, right? That's how we think about it in landscaping. When we're thinking habitat layering is about creating lots of different layers for protection. So you're protecting the soil, you're protecting the organisms that are using the soil layer, then you're also protecting the birds and everybody else in that environment that's using it, because they don't feel like they're sitting out in the open and easily predated. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. So layering. So this one doesn't really have layers, right? It's just all kind of planted in there. But it's actually a really fun and beautiful garden. But in fact, you know, it's a little challenged in that way because it's kind of hard to see everything. So if you're wanting to view your garden, and be able to look out into it, it just looks like a lot of big plants. So this goes in with the planting. Thinking about the full growth, what do we say, right plant, right place, the full growth of what that plant is gonna grow into, or what it could potentially grow into. So let's say that it says that this plant, is usually 3 foot, but could get to 6 foot. What should you plan for? 7. Plan for the full growth, right? With some plants, it's rare that they get pretty big, but it's also about the conditions. So if you're giving a part sun plant a lot of sun, it's gonna grow much bigger, okay? Or if you're giving a full sun plant, part sun, it's gonna be reaching for the sunlight. It's gonna get bigger than what it was expected to get. Where are we at time?
You have about 20 minutes.
Okay, we're good, okay. All right, invasive removals are always fun. I do these pretty often. So in here we have Nandina and we have all kinds of jazz, all right, all kinds of fun stuff. There was actually creeping thyme in the front, but creeping thyme is not a low maintenance plant, okay? Oh, no, not thyme, it was, creeping phlox, sorry. Creeping phlox is not a low maintenance plant in the sense of other things will grow in between it. And like, you gotta actually get out there and weed it. If you're not into weeding, that's not the plant for you, you know? So in this particular instance, we are removing invasives, and invasives can be very difficult to remove. So Nandina is one of those plants that is putting out a like tuberous type root where It could be a really big root that's real obvious, or it could be a little piece that kind of reminds you of turmeric. And you gotta really sift through to find it. So an important thing to know about when you're doing invasive removals is that it's not a one-time thing. You remove most of it the first time, but there's always gonna be something that was in there. And you just have to know ahead of time, maybe I don't do all of my planting right now. So like you remove the invasives, like let's say you get them all removed in the fall. Wait it out a little bit in the spring, see what pops up first, okay? Because either it's gonna be the same invasive, or it could be something cool that you didn't know that you had. Because a lot of times there's native seed in your soil already, and there's already fun stuff, and you just have to wait it out.
Question before you leave.
Mhm.
What did you put in the back with the Nandy? Was it a?
I think, I wanna say it's a Ilex, glabra,
Okay.
yeah. A while ago, sorry, but I think that's what that was, yeah. So, see, it's an evergreen, it puts out a really nice form, big shrub, but it like takes a while. So that's the thing about when you're putting them there, it's not instant. Native planting is not instant gratification. It takes some time to get going, but once it gets going, it's beautiful. Let's see. Okay, yeah. That was fun. So cleanups aren't always a one, like, don't think of a cleanup as like one big job you gotta do sometimes. Like, especially if you have a property that looks like this, if you have, big, areas that are like full of invasives, this is a really difficult removal. You know, do what you can do and then get to the rest later. It was already there, you know what I mean? You're only making it better by removing it, so just take your time. So sometimes what I do with the crew so that they don't get overwhelmed is we'll like, kind of make a circle. You know, we'll use like a, whatever we have that day, but like it could be rope or anything. Just this, okay, this is what we're gonna remove today. Focus on that and don't get overwhelmed with all of it at the same time. Because let's say that you didn't even get that circle done. Imagine how overwhelmed you're going to feel and want to quit if you like think about trying to get it all done at one time. So here, there's all kinds of stuff happening here. There is, oops, we're not there yet. There is vinca, there is English ivy, there is creeping Charlie, there is, I mean, it's like, you know, all kinds of stuff. And this is a really tough removal, you know? My favorite tool for stuff like this is literally just like a weeding knife. You go in there with a weeding knife. We use knee pads and we use like tarps, you know, and you just go in there and you're digging it out. And as you're doing it, you're looking at the soil and seeing, did I leave anything? You know, and you'd be amazed what a difference that makes when you're doing these invasive removals, rather than going in and trying to like spray it or, you know, trying to make it easy usually makes your job harder in the long run. Someone talking over there? Okay. So we didn't install this. This was under that. Okay? This is how overgrown things can get. Okay? So my goal here today was not to like, because I know we've already nerded out on plants quite a bit, right? And we've talked about habitat, and we've talked about why natives is important. Is to kind of look at our landscapes and the differences in our landscapes and address some of those questions that we have on how do we manage this? How do we deal with it? You know? And you just don't try to, you know, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Okay. So any questions for me?
Okay, this was way back from the beginning. You showed doing this other with the block tarp.
Uh-huh.
I came to this conference last year. Nancy Berlin told me, don't use a block tarp, use a clear tarp. So I did, and it didn't work at all.
All
So
right.
she said, use the block tarp, because don't use the block tarp, because if you use the block tarp, every snake in the county is gonna come move it under the tarp. And when you take off the tarp, you're gonna have a lot of really unhappy friends who are gonna be mad that you took their tarp away.
Okay, yes, I'm not gonna say, that's a perspective. That's a way of
Okay.
looking at it. Uh-huh.
My experience using black tarps is you put down the tarp, the first thing that moves in is rodents. Because they go in and they eat and they've got protection and so on. Then the snakes move in and eat the rodents.
So you guys, this is not a thing. Let me talk to you
And
about,
then
let me talk to you about why it's not a thing. If you do this correctly, that is not a
in the
thing.
summer, no,
So-
I do a full year.
Yeah, you have to think about, first of all, there's a time period of which you do it, and then about the application itself. So if you have left gaps in it,
Yeah.
and something can just easily crawl in it, yeah.
You
It's
got it.
any hiding place around your house can encourage rodents, can encourage snakes, can encourage anything like that. I mean, you could leave like something simple as leaving your trash can next to your garage. That is a hiding place, you know? And these animals are just looking for refuge. So just kind of think of it along that way. They can be anything. I had an experience where we were moving, Lariarke, and, it was closer to the end of the year, right? Severed a snake right in half. Severed it right in half. Oh my heart was broken. Oh my goodness. Yeah, severed that thing. And then my foreman had to kill it because I didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
So they, you know, they're gonna, it was under the plant. And there's no way of knowing that it was under the plant.
So it seems like the way that you're doing it, that's the right way, is that like, when I look at your pictures, it's really snug on the ground. So like, what's your secret? 'Cause I know that's what I did wrong, is like, I basically just made a tent party for the crabgrass, and they had a spa day, and they were so happy.
And they were going like this.
Yeah, I had a crabgrass spot,
Thank you.
I had the happiest crabgrass, but I don't want happy crabgrass, I want your picture.
Yeah, so let's talk about what she just talked about. So she's basically saying, you know, with clear plastic, covering it with clear plastic versus covering it with black. So it's just two different techniques, okay? So one is solarization. So solarization is clear plastic, and you're trying to encourage the seeds that are in the soil to germinate and then die. That is the purpose of solarization. And that is done in the spring. So you're like early springing it. So it's like you're creating like a greenhouse experience. We're trying to get everything to come up and then,
It did and then some.
yeah, come up, but then kill it. Like you leave it on there for an extended period of time. I would say that the biggest, fail in doing this is when, there's too much air going in there. When you put it down, you can almost immediately see if there's air gaps. You just watch it where it bubbles up. Then you need to go in there and fix that because you don't want any air in there. So yeah, when we do these, they're really, really snug and flat down to the ground.
Use stakes?
Yes, so basically, you tuck it in. Think of it like, when you're, making a bed, you're putting on the bed sheet. You know, you tuck it in nice and good. And then we use landscaping pens to kind of keep them really tight in there. But it's also good to have something heavy to stick on there. And usually we're not spending money to find something heavy. You just look around, what's heavy, you know?
Scrap lumber
Different
and
things. There's some
Old
2x4s, use that. There's some, you know, some big branch or something. You can use whatever's around you. Stone works really great, but it's expensive and other people might steal it, apparently. Yeah, but that's one of the greatest techniques that we use and the easiest. And I mean, even though we don't love plastic, it's something that can be reused over and over and over and over again. You don't have to keep buying this. Just don't stick a whole lot of holes in, you know? So stick the holes in where they're needed and call it a day.
And there are different lengths of landscaping pins too.
Yeah.
If you're talking about the wind and pulling it up, try and find the longer ones.
Mhm.
And I'm sure you can find them online. I love the garden.
But they don't always keep it snug enough. So they help to kind of tuck it in, but you want to put something heavy on it. So another thing is there's landscaping pens now that are like biodegradable. Yeah,
Oh.
that doesn't work that well. We tried it. And we were like, oh, this is biodegradable. We try everything.
And indeed, it's degraded, huh?
It does. Maybe a little too soon.
So I have a challenge when I'm looking to plant a certain area, and I see that plants should be in dry soil or moist or wet, and I mean, if it's obviously bone dry, or if it's like totally saturated soil, I can figure it out, but like, how moist does the soil need to be for it to be moist according to that definition
Yeah.
versus dry or wet?
It's a great question, and it's one of those that it's like, it comes over time. I'm gonna give you my best explanation, okay? Basically, do you cook rice at all?
Mhm.
Okay. You know how like, you stick your finger in about this much to know how much water it is? It's the same. So you stick your finger into the soil, about an inch in maybe, and if it's moist, like you can feel moisture on your finger, then it's probably fine. But like, if it feels dry an inch in, then that soil is pretty dry. And either, it needs to be watered or amended or whatever, but like, that's kind of the indication, is like, if you imagine a wet paper towel and wring it, bounty, okay? Not the cheap one, okay? So wring out that paper towel, that's moist, you know? But if that paper towel is dripping, that's wet. I'm kind of giving you an idea of like it's one of those, it's like, it comes with time. And I can tell you that, when I first started off, I did a very opposite route of getting into plants. Really weird. My dad and I used to build ponds. And so I was really into aquaponics because I had to figure out how to keep ponds clean, and we used plants to do that. But then when I got into soil, I was like, I don't know how much water they need, you know? And it took a while. It takes a while to get comfortable with that. But if you shoot for like medium moisture in your garden, that's usually okay. That usually can help both the stuff that likes it a little bit more on the wet side and the stuff that could do dry to medium. There's a lot more medium soil comfort in plants than there is like the total opposites. But the stuff that likes it dry, we gotta give them that. You know what I mean? And the stuff that likes it on the wetter floodplain side, you gotta give. It's usually just sticking them in the right places. So for example, if you have something, river birch, we'll use that. You're not gonna put that at the top of the hill, right? You're gonna put it at the bottom, because that's where the water is going to collect. And that's what they like.
So what I found, because I also like trying to pick out native plants, you know, sun exposure, soil, I'm like, and then sometimes I bought stuff in the past where I really didn't. Like Zizia, I planted it where it
I love
is. It's very dry where it is. It is
Zizia-
fabulous. Like they
Zizia-
say it needs moist, but it's adapted to my.
That was a
garden.
plant in here.
So
I'll
it-
show you.
Yeah, over a few
Stare it
years,
out for
some
a
of those
second.
plants that want medium moisture can adapt to a dryer, but not immediately.
Okay.
That seems to be my experience, so I'm like, I don't know if I would. I'm gonna wait.
I think that
Sometimes
That
when
might
you
put Zizia
plant
there.
around what you plant, you may think it's moist, or you may think it's a dry spot, but if you have mature trees around it and you don't have a lot of rainfall, it's not gonna, it's never gonna be moist there, because there's a lot of competition. If there's grass, there's gonna be moisture competition too. So it's not just necessarily the site, it's the exposure, and it's the existing plants around it too.
yeah.
So,
If you have beech trees, very dry forest area, they are waterlogged. like-
Pines, things like that. But this
My
is,
shade is dry.
it's almost not to be unexpected, because that's what exists in that type of community.
Yeah,
So it's about knowing what type of community your plants are coming from, right? So for example, who has a list? DCR, if you look up, DCR, natural communities, you just Google that, you're gonna get all of these plant communities that you can go through and learn. And you can just put in your plant, the particular plant you're talking about, and it'll tell you which communities it occurs in. And often you'll have a plant that occurs in all types of communities. Red maple, all over the place, you know? But it'll give you an idea of what type of conditions it grows in and who it can grow with.
and it really is trial and error, you know, because I grew, tuberosa, the orange, you know.
Oh, it's what, yeah,
And a couple different parts of my yard, and the one,
butterfly.
I'm sorry, the one area gets great sun, it's fine, but I wanted this, this other one.
Yeah,
Put it over there.
they don't care about what
It
you want.
didn't adapt well
They
to
don't care
not
about
having
what-
enough sun, so
Yeah.
sometimes they don't, you
Mhm.
know, it's really trial and error with these
Plants wanna
plants.
be where they wanna be, and it's all
Yeah.
about their, so knowing like, you know, what's their strategy in survival? What
Yeah,
is their strategy?
it's good way to look at it.
So sometimes we pick a plant because it's pretty, because it manipulated us, right? But it's survival techniques. So let's say if it's a plant that grows in the meadow, you know, that's a very competitive place to grow. Because it's so much sun that everybody wants it. So they're all gonna try to grow as tall and as big as they can, put on some crazy root systems in order to be the biggest, baddest plant, you know, and get what it needs. But, you know, sunlight is really interesting, and what I'll tell you
Yeah.
about that is that, don't worry so much about it.
Yeah.
Okay? We don't, in the areas that we have, we've got buildings, garages, you know, all kinds of structures all around us, and those structures change the environment tremendously. They create all of these little areas, these little microclimates within our gardens, where some areas are really like high moisture areas because it's getting shaded out, you know? Or, you know, the soil is different here on this side than this side. Why, you know? And it's just about paying attention to what's going on and just using what you have and putting the right plants in the right place, you know? It's not complicated, it's very easy when you start paying attention to what's going on, you know? And, so like, we tend to overthink things when we're gardening and think that we have to go out there and just like, you know, religiously do all this stuff. Not really. Let it do what it wants to do. Add in a few, remove a few, you know, and just let it be. The less we're in there disrupting, the better they grow and the better habitat you've built, because it's not a scary place to come hang out in your garden. Any other questions?